I'm Clara Whitmore, 30 years old. 6 weeks ago, I was just an ordinary elementary school teacher in Brooklyn, living on a modest salary in an old apartment filled with the rumble of passing trains. My life was simple, but I was content, at least until my world collapsed. My grandparents, Henry and Eleanor Whitmore. They were the ones who truly raised me more than my own parents ever did. They were wealthy but always taught me that dignity matters more than money. When they died in that terrible car crash, it felt like I had lost the last good part of my family. Then came the day of the lawyer meeting. Inside Edward Lang's luxurious office, I learned that they had left me their entire fortune worth $28 million. Instantly, the relatives who had ignored me for years suddenly appeared. Their eyes no longer held affection, only greed. If you want to see how money reveals a family's true nature, stay tuned. Where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe, because this story will make you never look at your family the same way again. I grew up in a family where everything had a price, even affection. My father, Philip Whitmore, always said, "In this world, you are respected only if you have something others want." He was the CEO of a minor branch within Whitmore Holdings, proud to call himself the rightful heir. My mother, Margaret, appeared at every social event, always posing under flashing cameras, yet rarely remembered what grade I was in or what food I liked. To them, I was merely Henry and Eleanor's little granddaughter, a title used to gain sympathy at parties. In truth, the people who raised me were not my parents, but my grandparents, Henry and Eleanor Whitmore. I remember the weekends when they would drive their old ivory Cadillac from Connecticut to Brooklyn to pick me up. Grandpa Henry always brought a chocolate bar, while Grandma Eleanor held my hand the entire ride, asking gently, "So what did you teach the kids to draw this week?" They lived simply. Despite being the founders of one of Manhattan's leading real estate corporations, their dinners had no fine wine or silver cutlery, only beef stew, soft jazz, and the sense of safety I never felt at my parents' home. I once asked Grandpa Henry why they didn't live in penthouses like my father's friends. He smiled and said, "Because we've tried that. When people climb too high, they only find themselves lonelier." That sentence has stayed with me all my life. By contrast, my father saw simplicity as failure. He once yelled at Grandpa during a family meeting, "You could build an empire, yet live like a farmer. You're making the Whitmore name look small." Grandpa Henry simply replied, "Smallness doesn't come from wealth, but from the heart." I stood there in silence, but I understood that was the last time they ever spoke as father and son. After that day, my father practically cut off all contact with them. As for me, I still spent every school break in Connecticut. I loved strolling through the rose garden with Grandma, listening to the sound of Grandpa's pencil scratching over old blueprints, and eating her apple pie on Sunday nights. At their home, I never had to prove myself. I didn't need to be worthy of the Whitmore name. I only needed to be myself. When I turned 20, my grandparents created a private scholarship for me to attend a teacher's college. My mother objected, "A Whitmore becoming an elementary school teacher. Do you know what people will say?" I answered. "Maybe they'll say, I'm doing what I love." Grandma Eleanor smiled softly. "My dear, people laugh when they don't understand, but time will silence them." And she was right. While I taught children how to read their first words, my brother Julian learned how to burn through money with failed startup ventures. He was my father's perfect replica, confident, arrogant, and always mocking my hard work. "What can you even teach with that tiny salary?" he once sneered. I simply replied, "At least I don't need someone else's paycheck to feel valuable." A year ago, I visited my grandparents. They were still healthy, still as humble as ever. That afternoon, Grandpa sat in the library, sunlight filtering through the old glass window. He spoke slowly. "You know, Clara, wealth is just a tool. It can build, or it can destroy." I laughed. "You sound like you're teaching philosophy." "Grandpa, maybe. But one day, You'll understand. I didn't realize those words would be his final prophecy. 2 months later, the phone rang while I was grading papers. A distant voice said, "Miss Whitmore, this is the Connecticut police officer. I'm sorry, but your grandparents were in an accident." Everything after that dissolved into the sound of rain. The funeral was held at St. Tita, Paul's church. The crowd was large, but they weren't there to mourn. They came to observe. My father stood at the front, shaking hands as if he were signing contracts. My mother shed tears at just the right angle for the cameras. My brother bowed his head, but his eyes were fixed on the list of assets my grandparents left behind. I stood at the back, clutching their photo. Inside, I felt only one thing cold. The Connecticut house was now empty, filled only with the ticking of the grandfather clock. I walked through every room, touching everything: the piano, the wedding portrait, the rocking chair where Grandma used to sit. On the desk, I found an envelope written in Grandma Eleanor's soft handwriting for Clara. "Don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to live." I sank into the chair, feeling as though the air had been sucked out of the room. 2 weeks later, while I was still on bereavement leave, the phone rang again. It was Edward Lang, the family's longtime attorney. His calm but serious voice said, "Clara, I need you and your family to come to my office this Friday. Your grandparents left some important documents, and a surprise." I froze for a moment. In my mind, I could see the rocking chair and that unfinished letter. A vague premonition crept into my chest that the curtain hiding the Whitmore family's secrets was about to be pulled back. I didn't know then that the meeting at the law office would change everything and turn those who once called me their little girl into my sworn enemies. That Friday morning, the Manhattan sky was covered in a heavy shade of gray. I stepped off the subway, clutching my umbrella, trying to convince myself this was just another routine meeting with the lawyer. But deep down, I knew nothing in the Whitmore family had ever been routine. Lang & Associates occupied an old marble-walled building with towering glass windows. As I entered, the ticking of a grandfather clock echoed down the hallway, each beat sounding like a countdown to something about to explode. On the wall hung a black and white photo of my grandparents, Henry and Eleanor, taken on the day they inaugurated Whitmore Holdings' first building. They were holding hands, their eyes filled with pride. I gently touched the frame. The chill of the glass spread across my fingers. In my head, Grandma's voice whispered, "Never bow your head just because they say you're not enough." The glass door at the end of the hall swung open. A calm yet steady voice, Edward Lang, the silver-haired lawyer I'd met a few times before, called out, "Miss Whitmore, please come in. Everyone's here." The meeting room was so luxurious it made me feel out of place. A long walnut table, leather chairs, and light glinting off the polished surface. At the head of the table sat my father, Philip Whitmore, checking his watch, tapping his finger like he was chairing a corporate board. Beside him, my mother, Margaret, adjusted her Hermes scarf and glanced at me with eyes cold as glass. My brother, Julian, lounged back in his chair, wearing sunglasses indoors, one polished shoe resting on the other knee. And in the corner, my aunt, Patricia Langford, barked into her phone, "No, I'll be at the auction tonight, unless someone dies again." The air was thick with perfume, whiskey, and pretense. Edward closed the door and spoke slowly. "Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that today's proceedings are fully compliant with legal protocol. Please maintain order." My father smirked. "We only need to hear the important part." "Edward, I'm sure my parents left everything to me as they should." He leaned back, confident, as if waiting to be crowned king. Edward opened his leather case, pulling out a thick file. His voice was low and steady. "I will now read the final will and testament of Henry and Eleanor Whitmore. Drafted last September. Verified medically for full mental capacity, and legally notarized." The room fell silent. Outside, the rain hit the windows harder. Edward read each word slowly, each one slicing through the air like a knife. We, Henry and Eleanor Whitmore, hereby leave our entire estate, including all real properties, shares, and investment portfolios totaling approximately $28 million to our only granddaughter, Clara Whitmore. My heart stopped. A single beat of silence, then the room erupted. What my father shot up, his chair crashing backward. "This is impossible," my mother screamed. "Is this some kind of joke?" Julian slammed his hand on the table. "A grade school teacher gets $28 million, absurd." Aunt Patricia let out a sharp, vinegar-like laugh. I sat frozen. My hands clenched so tight they turned white. I didn't understand. I had never asked for this. I just wanted them to rest in peace. Edward didn't flinch. He continued, "We make this decision with full awareness and clarity. Our son, Philip Whitmore, and other family members have been adequately supported throughout their lives. This choice reflects the values we believe in, that true legacy lies not in money, but in character. I demand to see the original document," my father growled. Edward nodded calmly. "Of course." He placed a certified copy before him. My father flipped through the pages, his tone dripping with disdain. "This is fake. There's no way they'd leave everything to her." "Mr. Whitmore," Edward said evenly, "you're free to believe what you wish. But they also recorded a video, which they requested I play immediately after the reading." The lights dimmed. A screen at the end of the table flickered to life. My grandparents appeared, sitting side by side in their old library, dressed neatly, their expressions calm and composed. "Grandpa Henry, if you're watching this, it means we've gone on ahead. We don't wish to leave questions, only truth. Grandma Eleanor Phillip. Patricia, we love you, but love cannot be blind. We're disappointed that you've forgotten what matters. Most gratitude. Grandpa Henry. This inheritance is not a reward, it's a responsibility. Clara has lived the values we taught. She works hard, treats others fairly, and has never asked us for anything except our time. Grandma Eleanor. We trust she'll use what we leave behind to create good, not vanity." The video ended with Grandpa's familiar line, "Money is a tool, not a mirror. Use it wisely." The screen went dark. For several seconds, no one spoke. My mother broke the silence first. Her voice trembled not from emotion, but fury. "This is outrageous. They were manipulated, Edward." "Whose side are you on?" "I stand on the side of justice," he replied softly. My father's tone hardened. "I'll sue. No court will honor this ridiculous will." Edward gave a faint smile. "You can try, but with the medical certifications, witness videos, and original documentation, I'm afraid it will be difficult." Julian slammed his hand again. "You have to share the money with us. At least be fair." I shook my head slightly. I don't even know what to say. I never wanted. "Don't pretend to be innocent," Aunt Patricia snapped. "You stole what belongs to us." I looked at them, the faces I once called family. At that moment, I realized there was no love left in their eyes. Only hatred. Edward placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "They knew this would be hard for you," he said softly, "but they believed only you were strong enough to protect what they built." I tried to smile, but there was nothing but emptiness inside my chest. My father crossed his arms, his tone cold as steel. "This isn't over. Glada. 6 o'clock tonight. Our house on the Upper East Side. The family will settle this face to face." He walked out without a glance back. My mother followed, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume. Julian sneered at me. "Get ready. Teacher, tonight's lesson is for you." The door closed, leaving me alone in a room thick with tension and the sound of rain pounding against the window. Edward spoke quietly. "You don't have to go. Clara, I can arrange legal protection." I looked out at the city, blurred beneath the rain. golden lights melting like tears. No, I whispered. If they want to talk, I'll go. My grandparents taught me sometimes silence is an answer. But tonight, I won't stay silent. I gathered the papers and stepped out of the office. The cold wind lashed my face. But fear was gone. Only one thought echoed in my mind. Tonight, they will learn who truly carries the Whitmore name. If it were you, would you go to that dinner? Leave a comment below because I'm about to walk into a night where every fork on the table could be a weapon. The Manhattan night was draped in black velvet, glittering with the golden glow of thousands of windows in the towering skyscrapers. I drove through the city. My heart beat steady but heavy. Light rain brushed against the windshield, reflecting the blurred glow of neon signs. 6 o'clock tonight, the family will talk. My father's words kept echoing in my head, each syllable sharp as a blade. I stopped in front of the Whitmore Tower, where my parents lived, a penthouse on the top floor, larger than the elementary school where I taught. When the elevator doors opened, the scent of wine and expensive perfume flooded out. The crystal chandeliers glimmered brilliantly, but even their light couldn't chase away the chill that crept from within the people inside. My mother, Margaret, stepped forward to greet me. Her smile so perfect it frightened me. Clara, you're here. I'm so glad. Truly. Her voice was soft as velvet, but her eyes were empty. The dining table was covered with spotless white linen, the wine glasses arranged with military precision, as if for a ceremony. Julian raised his glass, a half smile curling on his lips. Well then, let's toast to our little teacher now, a millionaire. The crystal clinked sharply, but I didn't raise my glass. Philip Whitmore, my father, sat at the head of the table, back straight, eyes sharp as knives. Sight down. Clara, we'll talk like adults. I sat, keeping my tone calm. I didn't come here to argue. I just want to understand what everyone expects from me. He nodded, as if everything had been rehearsed. Good. Then I'll be direct. That money can't be yours to control. You're a teacher, you don't understand how to manage tens of millions of dollars. I'll take responsibility for handling that fund for you. He slid a thick folder toward me, its cover stamped with the title, Asset Management Transfer Agreement. My mother chimed in, her voice sweet but painfully fake. You'll still have your share. Of course. 10%. Maybe enough for you to live comfortably, teach, and travel. The rest, the family will help you manage. You know, great wealth comes with great risk. I let out a faint laugh. And you call theft help. Mother. The air froze. Julian smirked. Don't exaggerate. Sis, I just need a few million to start over. You've got 28 million, sharing a little won't kill you. We're family. Right. We stick together. Together, I repeated. I remember father cutting ties with grandpa. And you? Mother. Calling them stingy. But now that there's money, suddenly everyone's united again. Anger flickered in her eyes, though she kept her smile intact. You're being harsh. Clara, I only don't want you to make mistakes. Money can corrupt people. Yes, I said slowly. And maybe it already has corrupted this family. My father slammed his hand on the table. The sound rang out like steel striking marble. Enough. This isn't a sermon. Sign it. And we'll keep this matter quiet. If not, don't blame me for doing what's necessary. What's necessary? I asked. We'll sue. Do you think a court will believe a school teacher over a CEO who's managed hundreds of millions? Julian sneered, swirling his wine. Or, if you want, I'll find you a lawyer, but their fee might cost you a few of your cars. I looked around the table, 4 faces, 4 expressions. My father cold and calculated. My mother is gently manipulative. My brother mocking. And Aunt Patricia silent, but watching me like a predator waiting for a wounded animal to fall. I saw it clearly. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take. I took a deep breath. My hands felt ice cold. And if I don't sign, I asked quietly. Silence. Then my father leaned forward. Voice low and cutting. Then you're no longer part of this family. The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. My mother hurried to intervene. Philip, don't threaten her. We're still family. But she said it without looking at me. Her eyes fixed on the papers before her. Julian chuckled, raising his glass again. You really thought they loved you? Huh, wake up. The grandparents just chose you out of pity. I looked straight into his eyes and said softly, if pity taught me self-respect, then I'll be grateful for it forever. My mother sighed, standing up. Her tone turned cold as ice. Enough. You've chosen your own path. But don't forget, the apartment you're living in belongs to the company. Your father has the right to terminate the lease any time. I froze. What do you mean I mean? By tomorrow morning. You should pack your things. Don't make this harder than it already is. My father stood and walked away. The wine in his glass tilted. A few dark red drops spilling onto the contract, spreading like blood. I remained seated. Motionless. The scraping of chairs and clicking of heels echoed like a funeral march. When the elevator doors closed, I realized I'd been clutching my necklace so tightly my knuckles were bleeding. I stood, gazing around the cold, lifeless room. The family portrait on the wall, once my favorite, now looked foreign. Everyone in the picture was smiling. But now I knew those weren't smiles of love, but of power. I left the penthouse. Cold wind struck my face as I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The streets below still shimmered with light. People moving endlessly, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had ended. They can take my home, I whispered. But they'll never take what my grandparents left me. My dignity. I turned away, carrying only a small bag and the contract stained with wine. The glass door closed behind me with a sharp sound like the end of a chapter. If you were me standing between family and self-respect, would you sign that paper? Leave a comment below. Because from the moment I stepped out of that room, the real battle had just begun. The elevator doors closed behind me, leaving only the golden glow of the penthouse and the cold faces of those I once called family. I stood in the empty lobby, the sound of my heels against the marble floor echoing like a farewell. Outside, Manhattan was drenched in rain. The first drops hit my face, icy and sharp. Blending with the tears I no longer had the strength to wipe away. I walked into the street. Hollow inside, the city still blazed with light. But inside me was a dense, suffocating darkness. Cars moved. Lights flickered. And laughter echoed as if nothing had changed. Except for me, the woman stripped of everything by her own blood. In my hand was the damp, crumpled document. The asset transfer agreement stained with dark red wine like blood. I crushed it and threw it into a trash bin by the curb. The sound of paper hitting metal was dry and final, like the end of a life. When I reached my old apartment building in Brooklyn, the clock was nearing midnight. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, hoping at least this place still felt like home. But when I reached the door, I froze. The lock had been changed. A white paper was taped to the door. The printed words, cold and formal notice of termination of lease agreement, property owner Whitmore Holdings Properties. Below, in messy handwriting, is a note from the building manager. Sorry. I'm just following orders. Mr. Philip said you'd understand. I stood there motionless. The rain seeped down my collar, freezing my spine. A deep voice came from behind me. Miss Clara. It was Mr. Henderson, the night guard, a former police officer who had worked here for over 10 years. He looked at me with sympathy. I know what happened. Your father said the contract ended because you moved out. I didn't believe it. But I couldn't disobey. I forced a faint smile, my voice hoarse. It's all right. Mr. Henderson. I just need to grab my things. They changed the locks. I'm sorry. I nodded. There were no tears left to cry. I hesitated, then spoke softly. People are only good until they smell money. Miss, you're a good person. Don't let them ruin that. His words drifted like wind through the night quiet, but they struck straight into my heart. I sat in my car, staring at the dark building through the rain-streaked window. The droplets trailed down the glass like erased fragments of time. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with one word, Father. He hesitated, then answered. Clara, his voice was calm, almost casual. I heard you're at the building. Yes. What do you want now? Nothing. I just want you to understand this isn't revenge. It's business. I'm teaching you a lesson the world isn't fair. Only the strong are respected. You called to teach me about strength, I said quietly. No. To teach you that weakness has no place. I laughed dryly. Did you ever love me? Father. There was silence for a few seconds. Then his voice sank lower. Love, I invested in you. And that investment didn't pay off. My grip tightened around the phone before I hung up. That sentence cut deeper than any knife. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my trembling hands. Everything I had, my small apartment, my dignity. My family had vanished in one night. I thought I had already hit rock bottom. But the truth was, the bottom went deeper than I ever imagined. I opened the trunk, pulling out an old suitcase with a few clothes and keepsakes photos with my students, a couple of books, and the picture of my grandparents hugging me at graduation. I gazed at their gentle smiles. Grandma Eleanor once said, "There will be times when the world turns its back on you. But believe me, light always waits where you call home." I broke down not with sobs, but with quiet tears, falling softly like the pain leaving my body. I drove aimlessly through the empty streets. The rain tapping on the roof made a steady rhythm. Streetlights stretched into long golden streaks, memories passing by. In the passenger seat, I noticed the envelope Edward Lang had given me after the will reading. I'd never opened it. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper was slightly damp from the rain. Inside were a stack of documents, a short letter, and a small keychain shaped like a bunny one I recognized instantly. It was the same charm Grandma Eleanor had clipped to my school bag when I was a child. I unfolded the letter. It was written in Edward's neat handwriting. The house in Connecticut, the Whitmore estate, has always belonged to you. They anticipated everything. When you have nowhere else to go, return to where it all began. My heart pounded. Whitmore estate, my grandparents' old home. I started the car and turned around. The highway was empty. A sign read Connecticut 42 miles. The rain grew heavier, then lighter again, mirroring my heart. I drove in silence. The only sounds were the wind and the wipers brushing against glass. Crossing the bridge, I saw the river shimmer with city lights. I remembered Grandpa, Henry's words, "When you've lost everything, go back to where it began. Only there will you find yourself again." Almost 2 hours later, I turned onto the maple-lined road leading to the Whitmore estate. The porch light was still on. Even though the house had been empty for weeks, I stopped the car and sat for a moment before stepping out. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and fallen leaves. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked softly familiar, almost comforting. I opened the door. The house smelled faintly of apple pie and oak wood, as if my grandparents were still somewhere nearby. The family photos still hung on the wall, dusted but intact. I touched one and smiled through my tears. "I'm home. Grandma." I turned on the light. Warm yellow filled the living room. On the table sat another sealed envelope beside a silver teapot. In Grandma Eleanor's handwriting were the words, "If you're reading this, it means you've returned. And as I always told you, when people show their true faces, let truth be the only light to guide you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a thick folder, a small USB drive, and a folded letter. The letter, written in her familiar gentle script. Read, Clara. If you're reading this, it means you've survived the storm. We knew the family wouldn't spare you, but they forgot that we saw it coming long ago. In the USB are all the records, the transactions, loans, and broken promises. In the folder is the plan your grandfather and I prepared to protect you, and the honor of the Whitmore name. Don't be afraid. You are not alone. There are still people on your side. You are not just the heir. Clara, you are the keeper of our legacy. I set the letter down, my hands shaking. Suddenly, I no longer felt like a victim. Everything around me seemed to glow: the photos, the window, the curtains all whispering, "Stand up." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where the moonlight shimmered on the wet grass. "I promise," I whispered. "I won't let them disgrace the Whitmore name ever again." My eyes caught the phone on the table. A new message from Edward Lang. "I know you've arrived. Rest. Tomorrow we begin." I gripped the phone and took a deep breath. Outside, the night wind rustled through the trees, sounding almost like invisible applause. I thought I'd lost everything, but my grandparents saw further than I ever could. They didn't just leave me money, they left me a weapon. And tomorrow, the ones who laughed at my pain will bow their heads. Have you ever been pushed to your limits by your own family? Leave a comment if you believe that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. The first morning at Whitmore Estate was unusually quiet. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows, casting a golden glow across the wooden table where I'd read Grandma's letter the night before. I brewed a cup of tea, the scent of Earl Grey drifting softly through the room. Last night, I lost everything. This morning, I begin again. An engine sounded at the gate. A black sedan rolled in, and stepping out was Edward Lang, dark suit. Serious expression. "I assume you didn't sleep," he said in his deep voice. "No," I answered. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid." He gave a faint smile and placed a leather briefcase on the table. Henry and Eleanor didn't just leave an inheritance. They left allies. In the old dining room, Edward opened his laptop and displayed a list of people who had once worked with my grandparents. Carlos Ramirez, property manager. Rosa Delgado, business partner. Dorothy Reynolds, their most loyal housekeeper. They all know the truth about your family, and they're ready to help. The sound of another car came from outside. I stepped onto the porch and saw 3 figures approaching. Carlos, a middle-aged man with rough hands, gave me a sad smile. Rosa, a Cuban woman dressed simply, had sharp, intelligent eyes. Dorothy, her hair silver white, carried a basket of warm pies and whispered, "Mrs. Eleanor told me, if this day ever came, to stand by you." My chest tightened. I wasn't alone anymore. In the living room, Edward inserted the USB drive I had received the night before. The screen lit up. Dozens of video files and documents appeared. He played one. Footage from a security camera my father, in a black suit, entering my grandparents' house just 2 days after the funeral. He took a key to the safe and removed an antique watch and several folders. Then another video, Julian signing company share transfer papers, forging Grandpa Henry's signature. I felt dizzy. Edward spoke quietly. They thought they'd deleted everything. But your grandparents upgraded the security system last year. These are the backup files. My fingers dug into the armrest. They stole, right after the funeral. Rosa nodded. More than that, they withdrew funds from the employee trust and sold shares illegally. If this goes public, they'll lose everything. Shock reveal mid-sequence. My eyes burned not with anger, but with clarity. I used to think silence would keep the peace, but they refused to leave me in peace. So this time, I'll let them hear the silence of justice. Carlos gave a small laugh. the laugh of a man who'd seen too much corruption. Your grandparents always believed that when good people stand up, evil starts to tremble. We spent the entire morning reviewing documents. Rosa opened the digital ledgers. Typing swiftly, here Philip withdrew $1.2 million from the employee's pension fund and transferred it to a private account in the Cayman Islands. Edward nodded, his eyes sharp as ice. We'll issue a cease and desist notice. Any further transactions, I'll forward directly to the federal prosecutor. I looked at them people who had stayed loyal to my grandparents until the end and realized the true legacy wasn't $28 million. It was trust. While Edward printed documents, Dorothy brought a tray of warm apple pies. You should eat something, Mrs. Eleanor never let anyone fight on an empty stomach. Everyone chuckled softly. For a brief moment, the cold air inside the house felt warm again. By afternoon, as the sun sank behind the maples, Edward handed me an envelope. This is the first legal notice. I'll deliver one to each member of your family. I looked down at the paper titled, Notice of Investigation, Whitmore Holdings. A strange feeling ran down my spine. Not fear, but responsibility. I'm not doing this for revenge. I said, I'm doing it to protect what they built. Edward nodded. And that's exactly why you deserve to win. He packed his briefcase. Tomorrow we file the claim. Prepare yourself, the backlash will be strong. I smiled faintly. I've lived with backlash all my life. As Edward's car disappeared through the gates, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. Meet me tomorrow night. No lawyers. No outsiders. Just father and daughter. One final conversation. I stood still. The sun had completely vanished, leaving a deep violet sky. Carlos noticed my expression and stepped closer. Who was it, my father? Will you go? I took a slow breath. There was no tremor in my eyes now. Yes. But this time, you won't go alone. Edward texted a few minutes later. If you go, I'll be 1 block away. No need. I replied. My grandparents will go with me in their own way. Night fell. I sat alone by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden. On the table, a photo of my grandparents smiling. I placed my hand on the glass and whispered, Thank you for not letting me fall. On the computer, a new email had just been sent. The subject line glowed clearly. Subject notice of investigation. Whitmore Holdings. A small ding echoed like the first bell of a coming battle. I once thought justice was a scream, but now I know justice is the silence that waits. Ready. Tomorrow they'll see that the person they underestimated is the only one left who still honors the Whitmore name. Would you dare confront your own family to defend what's right? Leave a comment below, because in this war, I've learned that sometimes the enemy isn't outside the door, but carries your name. The Manhattan afternoon was painted in bronze. I stopped the car in front of Whitmore Holdings Tower, the place my father once called the empire of our bloodline. From the parking lot, I could see the 40th floor where they had summoned me for a family conversation. In my coat pocket, the USB drive felt heavy as stone, yet it was the only weapon I needed. Grandpa Henry's voice echoed in my mind. You don't need to shout to prove your strength. Just let the truth speak for you. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The elevator doors opened, greeting me with cold air and the familiar scent of expensive liquor. The conference room was brightly lit. My father, Philip Whitmore, sat at the head of the table, fingers interlaced. My mother, Margaret, sat beside him. Red lips curved into a thin smile. Julian and Aunt Patricia stood by the window, wine glasses in hand. As if waiting for a show to begin, Clara, my father said, his voice deep but controlled. We're still family. There's no need to escalate this. I'm not escalating anything, I replied, pulling out a chair. I just want to hear the truth. My mother tilted her head. Her tone honeyed. The truth is, we can settle this. Withdraw the complaint, and your father will transfer part of the company shares to your name. You'll get recognition, and we'll save face. Julian smirked. Better than letting people call you a greedy teacher. I looked at him calmly. Better than being called a fraud. The air thickened. My father set his glass down. The sharp clink sounded like a warning. You're crossing the line. Clara. No. Father. I said softly. I'm just getting started. I took out the USB drive and placed it in the center of the table. This is what Grandma and Grandpa left behind, and maybe what you need to see before talking about the Whitmore honor. I plugged it into the big screen. The light flickered. Then an image appeared. My father. 2 days after the funeral. Opened the safe in my grandparents' house and took files and an antique watch. Next came Julian. Sitting in an office, forging Grandpa Henry's signature on share transfer documents. No one spoke. Only the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence like the hiss of guilt. My mother's face turned pale. Aunt Patricia took a small step back. My father slammed the table. Where did you get this? This is a violation of privacy. The door opened. Edward Lang stepped in, calm enough to chill the room. I think you should listen. Philip. Copies of these recordings were already sent to the prosecutor's office and 3 major newspapers this morning. My father's face drained of color. You destroy your own father, I met his eyes. No. Father. You destroyed yourself. I just brought a mirror. Julian slammed his glass down, his voice shaking. You think you've won. The media will tear you apart. Edward's tone was icy. On the contrary. Julian. They'll write about her as the woman who defended the Whitmore legacy. My mother burst into tears, that same theatrical cry I'd heard all my life. You're tearing this family apart. Clara, I stood. My eyes calm. No. Mother. I'm burying the lies. Just then, the back door opened. Carlos. Rosa. And Dorothy entered. Carlos laid a folder on the table. This is the real financial report. Mr. Henry kept the original. I think Mr. Pruzia. Philip should see what truth looks like. Rosa turned her iPad toward them. Charts glowing on the screen. The $1.2 million withdrawn from the employee fund has been confirmed. The transfer documents all bear your signature. My father stared at the screen, his lips trembling. He threw the pen to the floor. All of you, you've betrayed me, Carlos answered softly. No. Sire, we stayed loyal to the ones truly worthy of the Whitmore name. I stepped closer to my father, my voice steady and low. You said family honor belongs to you. But true honor isn't measured in bank accounts. It's in how a man behaves when no one's watching. His eyes burned. But he had no words left. Edward's phone rang. He answered and nodded once. Yes. They're on their way. I asked quietly. Who? The Financial Investigation Bureau. They'd like a word with Mr. Poller. Philip Whitmore. My father collapsed into his chair. The light of power gone from his eyes. My mother lowered her head, her tears. Real this time. Born not from guilt, but fear. I stood there, feeling neither joy nor revenge. Only silence. When the agents entered, their flashing lights reflected off the glass walls like lightning. I looked around one last time. The lavish room. The people who once treated me like a burden. Now sitting in silence. I turned away and walked out. In the hallway, Edward walked beside me and whispered, You've done exactly what Henry wanted. Kept the Whitmore name clean. I nodded. Eyes fixed ahead on the glass doors that opened to the city. Outside, reporters swarmed. Flashes burst like fireworks. Someone shouted, Miss Whitmore, is it true? You just exposed your own family? I stopped, looked straight into the camera, and said, I didn't expose anyone. I just turned on the light and let the truth be seen. I stepped out of the building. Through rain and flashing lights, the weight in my chest was gone. I didn't seek revenge. I chose justice. And sometimes, justice begins with a teacher brave enough to say, Enough. If you had to choose, stay silent to protect your family or speak up to protect yourself, what would you do? Leave a comment. Because I believe sometimes the battles are only the lone ones dare to fight, are the ones that truly change everything. A week after the confrontation, the name Whitmore was everywhere on the morning news. CEO Philip Whitmore under investigation for financial fraud. Whitmore Holdings assets frozen pending inquiry. On the screen, my father walked out of the courthouse, flashlights glaring across his pale face. My mother followed behind, shielding her face, and Julian kept his head down, handcuffs glinting in the light. I turned off the TV. Inside the vast library of Whitmore Estate, only the sound of wind drifted through the windows. No satisfaction, no joy, only stillness. Justice doesn't make us happy. I thought, it only makes us lighter. The next morning, Edward Lang and Rosa Delgado arrived. Edward placed a folder on the table. The company can still be saved. Your shares have been restored according to the will. I looked at him and shook my head gently. I don't want to run an empire. I just want to preserve what my grandparents stood for. Rosa smiled, her eyes warm. Then do what they always said. Use money as a tool to create value. That sentence became a light within me. 2 months later, the Eleanor and Henry Whitmore Foundation for Education was officially born. Slow-motion scenes, children lining up to receive scholarships, teachers crying as new equipment arrived at their schools, and a golden plaque engraved with the words, "For those who build, not boast." I stood at the podium, giving the opening speech. My grandparents once said money is a tool, not a title. Today, we use it to plant seeds of kindness. Applause filled the hall. I saw Edward smiling in the crowd and Rosa wiping her tears. For the first time in months, I felt real light return to my heart. One afternoon, while reviewing foundation reports, the postman brought me an envelope, the handwriting unmistakable. My mother's. I sat quietly and opened it. Clara, you were right. Your father and I let ambition blind us. I don't ask for forgiveness, only that you still call me mother, even if only in your heart. Margaret. I folded the letter and placed it inside a glass frame beside my grandparents' photo. No tears, just a deep breath. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's refusing to let the past define you. From that moment, I was no longer a victim. I was a keeper. The following autumn, I returned to Connecticut, to the small hillside cemetery. I brought a bouquet of white tulips and a small card. On the card were only 2 words. I kept my promise. I knelt beside their grave. I did it. Grandpa. Grandma. The Whitmore name still stands, but this time, without deceit. A soft breeze blew through, spinning golden leaves in the sunlight. On the tombstone, the engraved words shimmered, integrity above all. I could almost feel them smiling. That evening, I opened the Scholarship Foundation's email inbox. A new message appeared from a 17-year-old girl named Maria Vasquez. The first scholarship recipient, Miss Clara. Because of you, I'll be the first in my family to go to college. I want to become a teacher like you. I reread the message several times, then smiled. My story from being cast out to standing tall had become someone else's hope. Maybe that was the true definition of victory. A year passed. Whitmore Holdings was restructured under independent supervision. Profits no longer soared as before, but employee welfare programs had doubled. Rosa managed finance. Carlos oversaw real estate. And I returned to my old classroom. The children rushed in, faces glowing with laughter. One boy asked, "Miss Clara, are you afraid of bad people?" I knelt down and smiled. No, because bad people fear the light more than we do. The whole class burst into laughter, and I realized the light wasn't just shining for me anymore. It was shining for those who would come after. That night, in the quiet room of Whitmore Estate, I wrote the final line in my journal. Revenge didn't make me stronger. Compassion did. Justice doesn't end with applause. It begins with the silence of a peaceful heart. I closed the notebook, gazing out the window where moonlight spread across the garden, soft and gentle, like the hands my grandparents once placed on my shoulders. I once thought revenge meant taking back what was stolen. Now I know true revenge is living so well that they can never touch you again. And when you do what's right, you don't just protect your name, you protect the souls of those you love. A year passed. The Whitmore Foundation had now become the largest community education center in the region. Every morning, as sunlight poured through the glass windows, I still heard the laughter of children echoing in the courtyard, the sound my grandparents once called the music of the future. Today was the first graduation ceremony of the scholarship program. On stage, I looked out at hundreds of young faces, glowing in their blue gowns. A year ago, I began slowly. I thought I had lost everything, but sometimes God takes away what we're used to give us what we truly need: purpose. The applause lingered. In the last row, I saw Julian. Gone was the arrogance. He stepped forward quietly and said, "I spent time in a rehabilitation center. They let me teach orphans. Now I understand. You didn't just save our family's name, you saved me." I placed a hand on his shoulder. No one stays bad forever. "Julian, what matters is whether we choose to change." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. That afternoon, I returned to the garden behind the foundation. Students were planting trees in the legacy garden, the memorial dedicated to my grandparents. A little girl asked, "Miss Clara, how long will it take for this tree to grow?" I smiled. "Just like justice, it takes time. But one day, it will shade everyone." I looked up at the sky, glowing orange, the breeze carrying the scent of fresh soil, and I knew, finally, everything had found its rightful place. Not through tears or triumph, but through peace. I once thought revenge meant making others hurt as I did. Now I know true revenge is living so well that they can't help but respect you. And if my grandparents are watching from above, I believe they're smiling because justice wasn't only served, it was passed on. Do you believe that kindness is stronger than hatred? Share this story, because somewhere out there, someone might just need a reason to believe in good again.